Welcome back. Let's go back to our top story now for some more information on today's return of stage 3 load shedding. We are joined now by energy analyst Prof Hartmut Winkler. Prof, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Now, late this afternoon, Eskom announced stage 3 load shedding due to what they term a temporary setback. Given the amount of reprieve that South Africans have enjoyed over the past few months, does this come as a surprise?
It did come as a surprise that it was so sudden. We shouldn't be surprised that we are going to get the occasional bout of load shedding. I think we were actually very honest. Quite honestly, I think we were quite lucky over the last year that we went for so long without any load shedding at all. Because I think it's quite clear that that Eskom's been walking fairly close to the line where you step over and you've got to go into load shedding. So they've been able to hold us there. But the problem is that you never really know when you're going to be experiencing a breakdown. And sometimes you might experience this whole series of breakdown happening almost simultaneously. And then you suddenly have a crisis. So whereas 10, 15 years ago, they would have been able to manage that. And now something like that, a sudden loss of 5,000 megawatts or so, would immediately get us into load shedding. And it looks like, well, unfortunately, it's really not clear what is going on. Eskom's communication has been very poor today. All they've been told us is that there will be load shedding stage 3 until further notice, but they've given no indication or very little indication about what might be wrong.
So precisely on that point, Prof, and also you saying that the surprise is the fact that it happened so sudden. So given how abrupt this implementation of stage 3 is this an indication that Eskom was equally caught off guard? And what do you think this temporary setback would be?
Yes, I think that what they were hoping for, and well, the odd thing is that just yesterday they issued a press release which sounded all very nice. They were telling us how well they've done, and apart from the short bout of load shedding in January, how well they'd been doing. Interesting enough, they also told us that their reserves that they were all stocked up as far as that's concerned, because that's usually that's what happened in January. They told us that their reserves were down. So unless this was a press release which was prepared a few days ago, and suddenly their reserves are pretty much depleted, I don't really understand that. One thing one could see in that statement, they said that they had roughly 13,000 megawatts of power on unplanned maintenance. That's what's in breakdown. That is fairly high. It's not as bad as we had at the height of load shedding in 2023, but that is quite high, higher than it should be. So it seems to me that while Eskom has managed to improve on their performance as far as maintenance and keeping and fixing their plants, they're still going to they're still in quite a difficult situation. These plants are breaking down more often than they should, and I think that's simply because they're old and they have been pushed too hard. So just like with a car, if you drive it badly and drive it too much, you are going to end up with constant problems. I think that's what they're facing. Another thing that might have happened, they also said that they expected to bring back about 3,500 megawatts on Monday that had been on planned maintenance. It's possibly they ran into some snag there and realized that they're not going to be able to do that, that there would be delays there. And that might have prompted them to very suddenly institute this load shedding simply because they realized that they'd be going to be running into problems on Monday. But this is already speculation until Eskom tells us what's happening. They've told us that tomorrow morning they will make a further announcement. I heard from your producer just a few minutes ago that when she tried to find out what was happening, she was told they were in a meeting. Eskom, what was the meeting?
That's
basically
right.
Trying to figure out what is wrong. So it looks like Eskom themselves are not exactly sure how serious this problem is, and whether this is going to be something that will be all over by tomorrow, or whether this is something which is going to drag on for a few more days.
Most certainly. We certainly are speaking on speculation, like you say here, Prof. And also just in relation to that statement that you're referring to, that they released yesterday, I mean, it all sounded like good news that a total of 3,410 megawatts would be returned to service before the evening peak on Monday the 24th. And here we are sitting on stage 3 load shedding in this weekend. The spokesperson, Daphne Mokoena, also made mention about the savings that they've made with regards to diesel, saying that their savings have reached 17.2 billion, representing a 58.9% reduction. Does this then speak to some of these breakdowns, that because we're not using as much diesel, we could find ourselves breaking down even more, or does it even relate in any way?
I think if there is a danger of load shedding, Eskom will most definitely try to use diesel to circumvent that. When Eskom makes these comparisons, they're always comparing themselves to the situation exactly a year ago.
Yes.
And exactly a year ago, we were still in load shedding. It'd be better if they made a comparison for next month, because next month we're going to. It was when we started hitting the load shedding free run, and so it is. Yes, so Eskom is saving a lot of money compared to 2023 and early 2024, simply because they're not forced to use diesel on an almost constant basis as they were then. So that does save them a lot of money. But I strongly suspect that if they have a diesel available now, that they're probably using it at the moment.
Prof, Eskom CEO Dan Morokane also said in the January power cuts that load shedding is largely behind us, given these structural improvements to generation fleet. How much out of the woods are we with regards to power cuts?
I think we're still going to have a situation like we're having tonight for quite a while, possibly another 2 or 3 years. It's clearly not as bad as 18 months ago, but we should always be ready for occasionally being thrown into a short duration load shedding. I don't think we're going to go back to a situation where we're going to be sitting in literally non-stop for weeks and weeks of continuous load shedding. But I think occasionally, as I mentioned, it's something that's difficult to predict, because you can't predict exactly when you're going to have breakdowns. There are breakdowns happening on a constant basis, but sometimes you'll just get a few happening simultaneously, and then it really knocks you. And unfortunately, that's still going to continue until Eskom manages to develop more supply of power. Right now, we are a bit short, and there's also very little being actually built. If we look at, for example, Kusile, 1 unit is still got to come online. That was supposed to have been finished last year. Last I heard was end of this month. They're going to try and get it online. There's a unit at Medupi where we had an explosion about 3 or 4 years ago. It took them a long time to fix that. It was supposed to be up and running again, but now I'm told, no, we're looking at March or sometime. So these delays are also causing some difficulties. The refurbishment of Kuiberg, life extension of Kuiberg Power Station took much, much longer than expected. And even now, we are still running on half power at Kuiberg, because even though they finished the work itself, they needed to shut it down again for some further tests. So we are a bit short, and the only thing which can help us a little bit, apart from the final units of Medupi and Kusile, is if some solar and wind power projects come online. A couple will be finished later this year, but they really aren't going to make such a huge difference. So one really needs to upscale the construction of solar and wind farms, which is possible, but you need to organize it, and you need to organize now.
I mean, Prof, you mentioned a little earlier on, and just speaking in terms of these units, in terms of the delays that we are seeing in them coming back on, and you also mentioned that 10, 15 years ago, we would have been able to handle some of these disruptions and setbacks, and simply now, because of the aging infrastructure, we are unable to come back online as quickly as we can. Should we expect that in the winter months we'd be seeing more of these sporadic disruptions?
The danger is higher. However, Eskom always schedules most of their maintenance work during the summer months. So now alone, if this was winter, they'd probably have quite a few extra units available to assist them. So Eskom normally plans it in such a way that they have I think at the moment they said something like 7,000 or 8,000 megawatts on planned maintenance. In winter, you'll find that it will shrink to next to nothing to try and make up the shortfall. But certainly at the moment, if many of these plants which are on scheduled maintenance could be brought back within a couple of days or weeks, but in winter then they wouldn't have this to fall back on. I think ultimately, we are going to get through the winter more or less okay, but I think always expect something like happened tonight to come when you least want it, unfortunately.
All right. Prof, thank you so much for your time. We shall await that official statement from Eskom tomorrow as we are now officially in stage 3 of load shedding. Prof Hartmut Winkler, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.